Light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. I had mentioned in another episode that there are these, social taboos, I guess you might call them, that one is never supposed to discuss religion and politics because it too easily leads to unpleasant conversation and so forth. And everything should be pleasant, and I'm afraid that rule has put such a priority on being pleasant that it has left a huge number of things in our society completely unaddressed. It's as if it's become more important to be pleasant than to be truthful, more important to be pleasant than to effectively address things that need fixing, that need correcting, that need cleansing of or reformation of some kind. The one I would like to address within today's show is this prohibition of discussing politics within pleasant company, shall we say. The first thing that becomes a requirement, see, I guess the thing is that people try to isolate the talking away from everything around it, and there's not really a way to have a conversation without having a human context. Every conversation has a human context. The thing is to be mindful of that context and to consider that whenever one has a political discussion, there will probably be people of all different political persuasions in the room. Even within a single political party, there are still debates and arguments about how certain things should be done or decided, or which policy or which candidate. We have multiple candidates from each of the parties in many cases. The challenge and opportunity to all of us is to have those discussions in ways that are civilized, that are mutually respectful, that recognize that underneath it all, what we want is an effectively functioning society in which to live. That we recognize that human society is a very complex phenomena that requires administrators with different sorts of specialties over different areas of life. And that some of these positions are elected or chosen by the community, and that there needs to be some way of doing that and discussing it so that we can make the wisest and most effective choice possible. So the first step is to remember there's somebody present who disagrees with me, and I need to be respectful to that person, because at the end of the day, if I'm in trouble or they're in trouble, I still want to know that he would stop and help me, and he needs to know that I would stop and help him, because we're more committed to having a world that works than we are to being right or being the dictator of some complex situation. When you think about it, being a dictator is really something that only losers ever do, because there is no dictator who, if the dictator were able to accomplish good things, we would call them a benevolent dictator. But the word dictator more often is applied to people who grab power, seize power, control power, and are not especially open to sharing that power with anyone else. The disadvantage of that is that they have no more than their own wisdom and intellect, no more than their tiny circle of advisors to give them all the wisdom they will ever have to use. If instead of being a dictator you have a community, you have the wisdom of the entire community coming together to find the best possible solution. If the community stands or falls on the decisions or existence of one person, the future of the community remains very, very fragile. If, on the other hand, the entire community, every individual within the community knows how to do whatever needs to be done, so that even if everyone else were killed and there were only one person left, that person would still know how to do whatever needs to be done to get the community back on track, or to take care of whatever was left, or to do whatever needed to be done. The witticism comes to mind of strength in numbers. What the witticism referred to is that when there's more than one person pushing for a particular solution or the implementation of a particular policy, that having more people doing it provides strength to oppose an adversary far beyond what any individual would have. The additional strength in numbers, though, is not just the strength of force, but the strength of wisdom. By having more people who are familiar with the challenge and know the resources and know the capacities of the tools that are available, you have that many more thinking minds that can help create a solution that is truly effective. The thing to remember in discussing politics civilly is that it's about discussing the ideas, not attacking the people. It's not about satisfying who is right and who is wrong. It's about finding what is the best solution for the community, and perhaps not even that. Just to bring out the ideas and saying, well, if this would happen, then I think this is what would follow. And if this would happen, I think this is what would follow. But because we don't have control of the future, and the future is unformed, and the future is something that is formed by everybody working together and everybody making their own unique contribution, to say this is what would happen if is an arrogant statement that is ultimately unsupportable. The best one can do is to say, from my understanding of the dynamics, this is what I would expect these circumstances to produce. And someone else might say, well, from my understanding of the dynamics, this is what I would expect to be produced. Having that kind of discussion, though, lets everybody in the room go home knowing that many more ways to answer that particular problem. Which one works, which one doesn't, without testing each and every single one, how would you really know? Some people would insist that I have greater experience, you should listen to me. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. Or maybe we should try yours, but we should also try this one. Even the most brilliant inventors and statesmen have still come up short on numerous occasions, anticipating a response that their adversary did not provide, which steered everything in a completely different direction. Some people have tried to tell me sometimes that you must do this because if you don't, then... And I have had, I learned when I was in college, I guess, to get in the habit of saying, not necessarily so, but let me investigate it a little further. Because there were times where I was told that if I didn't finish this assignment, or do this, or go there, or write the way the professor wanted, then I would be destroyed, and I wouldn't get my degree, and college would be over. It never happened. In all those different cases, there were other challenges that came up, but the disaster that was forecast by a well-intentioned individual didn't happen. Even those who forecast the weather can look at the weather patterns and the amount of humidity in the air and so forth and say that, well, if we have this much and this much, it typically produces this. But history is filled with examples where those same circumstances didn't produce that. All of which is just to say, be humble and ask, how does the other person see it? The thing we have to remember is that humanity is one big family, and as such, the dynamics we're struggling for really aren't all that different. Everybody needs a way to feel safe, something to eat, something to wear, and if the weather turns cold. These are all the same basic challenges no matter where you go on the planet, no matter what language, no matter what race, no matter what religion. These are the same basic needs that human beings experience. In considering the different political systems and the different economic systems, which there's a really fine line between political and economic systems. Usually one goes hand in hand with the other, and you don't get an economic system without it attaching itself in some way to a political system. The thing I found fascinating when I was having a discussion with somebody once, and I never really considered before, but I had to admit the person was right. And that was when they said that basically any system will work as long as the people love one another. As long as everybody loves everybody, any system will work. Capitalism, socialism, communism, it just doesn't matter. As long as everybody really and truly loves each other, any system will work. If they don't, if there is selfishness and greed and hostility and violence and all the things that could be considered opposite to love, I don't think it matters what economic system you have or what political system you have. None of them will work. There will always be breakdowns. There will always be a lack of trust. There will always be something that goes really seriously wrong in a really terrible way. Because what it comes down to, whether it's politics or economics or spirituality, love is what creates the bridge between a point of beginning and a point of resolution. Love is what is the bridge between a resource and a person who needs it. Love is what gives us a reason to take care of all the individuals that would be affected. In deciding to have these sorts of political discussions, ultimately we are deciding that there just might, against all odds perhaps, there just might be something that we could learn from this person. And we're not listening to them in the sense of saying you are right. And at some point we may run out of energy and simply need to say, I need to take a break now. I can't go any further down this path at this point. But to maintain oneself as someone who cannot be questioned, there may be a flaw that you didn't notice that your enemy would be happy to point out to you. And I don't think you should care who it is that points it out to you. What's important is that you discover what the weakness in your perception is and that you find some way to address it. I guess the thing that keeps a debate or a discussion from becoming an argument is remembering first and foremost that the challenge and the life and the world that you're essentially trying to nurture through whichever system each one is recommending, it's bigger than the moment of debate. It's bigger than the system. Even if you consider a capitalistic system of economics to have lasted for 1,000 or 2,000 years or 3,000 years or 5,000 years, you're still naming a specific limited quantity. It may be a big quantity, but it's a limited quantity. It is not infinite. There is an end of the line if you keep going one more and one more and one more. In deciding to have these sorts of political discussions, the difficult consideration is that if you look at the oldest countries of the earth and go back to what they remember as their first history, lo and behold, they have been through a succession of political systems. the thing that keeps them identified as a country is the love they have for each other and the ways they have aligned with a particular region or territory or geography. If you consider that you have been in one of the older countries of the world and that your country has gone through a succession of governments, you could even contrast and compare how life under the different systems has changed and how effective or ineffective each one was in granting certain needs. The bottom line is that every system has to create a way for the people to eat, a place of shelter, a place of doing community, and a place of interacting with one another. There's just too many of us to live in isolation or to pretend that it isn't happening, and yet that's exactly what these conversations do when they say we can't discuss politics, is it keeps everyone very isolated, keeps us from learning how each other thinks, and because of how each other thinks, to what extent or in what ways we can be collaborators. It's not, my country right or wrong, because the only way for any country to maintain its honor and maintain its ability to survive is to hold its leadership and its representatives, its systems, if you will, accountable, that they really are doing what they say they are doing, that they say they want to do, and that if they are not doing those things, that the people will hold them accountable. In deciding to have these conversations about politics, one of the important things to keep in mind is that we're also opening ourselves up to be questioned. That when someone says, why do you believe that? We can say why we believe that. Or we can say, I haven't worked out why, I just know in my heart that it's true. Not a lot of conversation can follow that, but it's still a statement that should be respected. In learning more ways of doing government, more ways of doing economics, more ways of doing society, we actually strengthen ourselves and strengthen our communities toward more long-term survival, specifically because it may be somebody else's ideas that opens the door that allows for the miraculous resolution to happen. As Sister Hu, I've occasionally been called an activist, and part of me really doesn't want to be one because I really don't enjoy debate, don't enjoy butting heads, I don't enjoy, well, for that matter, I really don't enjoy standing out. I would just as soon blend in as much as anyone else. And yet, having discovered that I can't do that, as an activist, I choose to stand up for the one in need because I want there to be someone to stand up for me someday. As much as I may have my own political system that I recommend or favor, or my favorite candidates, I still want to go on learning from others how they balance their systems, how they make it work, how they do their elections, and how do they handle it if something gets in the way of that. If an oligarch or a dictator decides that there will no longer be any fair and honest and open elections, what am I going to do about that? And if I am threatened with, either you will do it our way or we will kill you and all of your family, and could I do that even then? And part of me wants to say, no, I couldn't do it even then, because the person who allows for some intolerable evil to be tolerated essentially facilitates the possibility that new laws will be put into place and the same freedoms won't exist after that. In this country especially, I suspect there are a lot of people that take freedom of speech for granted, but it really can't be, because there are numerous countries all around the world, some of them very advanced and evolved societies, who don't have freedom of speech, who don't have the same civil liberties that we do in this country, or don't have them in the same way that we do in this country. And it keeps a number of things from being investigated and checked, and it is by accountability that we have the right to trust each other, and if we want to be trusted, then we have to be willing to be accountable. In our political discussions, if we avoid them, the accountability doesn't happen. If we embrace them, accountability can happen in the ways that we require them to happen. The other thing that is perhaps one of the frustrating aspects of human experience is that everything is so mixed, and that every good candidate or good president has made mistakes, and every bad president has done a few things almost out of character totally right. And of course, no one really agrees on which were the bad presidents and which were the good ones, because, well, it's kind of like when I was in college and we had required chapel at the particular college I attended, and people would describe the chapel speaker, because usually it wasn't like a ritual service like in the Roman Catholic Church. It was usually like a lecture where someone would give a speech on some religiously relevant topic. And afterwards you would ask people, was the speaker good, was the speaker not good, whatever. No one described them in terms of whether he cited sources, whether he was well informed, whether his sources were credible. They all said, I liked him, I didn't like him, based on how much they agreed with what the speaker said or not. And I'm afraid too often we address our politicians the same way, not by looking at what they actually did or what they actually said or whether it was actually effective and for whom it was effective, but rather on whether or not they agreed with whomever the particular person was. And the thing that I try to remind myself is that in the history of every country you have good presidents and you have bad presidents. And statesmen and congressmen and whichever position of elected government you want to refer to. The point is that the documents of the country, of the state, of the community are such that it has the ability to survive bad administrations. And that when the next election comes around, trusting that there really is a next election, that the whole process isn't subverted into a total revolution. It's an ongoing sort of sense that we elect someone, we hope they'll be good. If they're not, after their term is up, we elect someone else. We hope they'll be good. If they're not, we elect someone else. There have been a number of really bad choices, in my humble opinion, in various offices. I think everybody would agree that there have been bad choices. They just don't agree on which ones were the bad choices and which ones were the good choices. The point is that the country, the state, the community has found ways to survive even bad administrations. So that when someone says, if so-and-so wins this election, it's going to be the end of the world, well, that's probably an exaggeration. There may be some really serious consequences, and so it shouldn't be taken lightly. Selection of leadership should never be taken lightly. But it needs to be done in a civil sort of manner, and we need to be respectful and humble about what we simply don't know and can't predict. There's no way to know whether this is really going to happen. Whether if this person takes this action, if everyone's going to respond in this way, and if this person runs for office, what is going to be the voter turnout, and will this person get his or her promises or policies or programs or recommendations passed? Or is there so much complexity in our political administration that even the best won't get anything done? A lot of people would look at that and throw up their hands and say, it's pointless, why are we even doing this? Well, the reason we're doing it is because even with all the ups and downs and good examples and bad examples, there's still administration that has to happen. Sometimes it may be done better and sometimes it may be done worse. But the pluses and minuses, again, it goes back to too often. I mean, it's kind of shallow and lame to say it, but it goes back to, did I agree? But it really shouldn't be about agreement. It should be about, did it work? Are we a stronger, healthier, wiser, more loving people than we were before? In the Crusade for Unions with the United States, there was the infamous story of the Triangle shirt factory, that They were striking for better conditions, and the strike went on for a long time, was supported by very prominent people, and still was not successful. They went back to work, and I believe it was within a few months, the very conditions about what they'd been complaining combined to create a disastrous event in which something caught fire. The building was engulfed in flames very, very quickly, and I believe it was over 100 women died because they were on the 10th floor of the building and the ladders wouldn't reach and there was no way to get out and the exits were locked. And I mean, it was a disaster of incredible proportions. And they had bodies lined up and down the pier afterwards, trying to identify all the women who died in that. And after that, the advances of safe working conditions for workers and so forth, all the things that they were pushing for by engaging in their union strike, all of those things happened. But they didn't happen until those women died. I think from a certain perspective, I think that's wrong. I think it's tragic. I don't think anything should ever have to be that way. But there does seem to be a disturbing precedent throughout human history that the major advances in government and administration and societal reform only come after the ground has been watered with the blood of martyrs. I'm not saying we should be martyrs, but I think if we're ever in a situation where someone says, do what I say or else, I would say, give me the or else, because I cannot consign future generations to slavery just because you're a megalomaniac, just because you want to rule, just because you want to enslave people. I will not be the one to hand that possibility to you. And if you have to kill me, then kill me. But I will not be the person who allows this evil to go forward. It's one of those things that come up in political discussions, but I think it's something that really needs to be openly discussed. Not so that we can persuade others, that's not the point at all, so that we can learn ourselves about being people who come together in support of just and wise governments that are genuinely effective. And by their effectiveness, the entire citizenry prospers. It's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to all of us working together.